Hey guys, I'm going to talk to you today about reclaiming clay. At the Clay Hand Studio, we really try and get our students to be part of that process, and we found that people really love it because it encourages a more mindful practice. Clay is eternal until it's fired the first time, so anything that you decide not to keep in the making process can be recycled and reused and made into a new piece, which is pretty epic. So I'm going to show you how to do that process. Let's say I've just finished making a little hairy McClary over here, and in my making process I had some bits of clay that dried out, or little crumbs that came off. I could even recycle hairy McClary himself, although I think he's quite cute, so I think I'll keep him, but you could break him up into little pieces and put him in the bucket. And here I've got some clay in different stages. This clay was maybe the piece that I took hairy McClary off of, and it is still actually pretty mushy. If I push my thumb into it, it makes a nice indent, so I can see that clay is actually still fine to work with. I'm going to put it back into my bag over here and close it up so that it's airtight. You can just spin the bag and tuck that under. It'll stay nice and wet in there to be reused next time. These pieces here, they look the same color-wise, but when I press my hand into it, it doesn't leave as much of an indent. It's called leather hard, and that we want to then reclaim with a bit of water. So the smaller the pieces are in your bucket that you're reclaiming in, the better. So break that up into little pieces. I usually say about a thumbnail size is good. So we can just break that up into here. You don't have to be too precious about it, but the smaller the better. And then these bits here I can scrape into the bucket. If it's bone dry like this, it will also break easier. And in fact, we prefer clay to be bone dry when putting it into a bucket to slake. The last little bits I can scrape up with my handy ruler, put in the bucket. And we actually want quite a lot of water in here. Can fill it almost up, all the way to the top, so that the clay is sitting in that water and slaking until next week. That'll take a couple of days and it will start to become nice mushy mud again. And in that process we're increasing the plasticity in the clay, and often this reclaimed clay is actually better quality. It's nicer to work with, and yeah, at my grandmother's studio, her students used to always fight over the reclaimed clay. The more mature it is, the better. So I've got a bucket here that's been slaking for a while. You'll need to pour a bit of that water off the top off, and also maybe spend a bit of time just mushing the clay around in here a little bit. So we want to start that process of mixing it up, because you might still have some bits that are hard and soft. I'm going to show you how to splice that together later, but for now you're just going to use your hands to mush around. This was my favorite job when I was a kid. It's such a delicious mushy process. And we're going to then just put it out onto this plaster of Paris slab over here. Plaster of Paris is great because it essentially is going to pull the moisture out of the clay all the way along the bottom. So we want to make a nice flat pancake. The more surface area we have covering the plaster of Paris slab of the clay, the better. Ooh, it's a bit of an excavation process, but satisfying. Okay, so this can then dry out. People always ask, how long does it need to dry for? It really has a lot to do with the weather. Like in winter, I might leave this out for the whole day. In summer, 20 minutes. So you've just got to watch your clay, not wash it. Watch your clay. And when it starts to stiffen up enough that you could almost imagine working with it again, you're going to flip it over, just like a pancake, and let that side expose to the air and dry out. And when you are done, so I would have left this for 20 minutes, I will then come into my wedging process. I will move hairy McClary out the way. I'm going to use a wire cutter to splice the clay. So I'm pulling the wire up, and then I'm going to slam some clay on top, stacking it, and then on top of the wire cutter again. slam it on. The reason we're slamming is we want to make sure that there is no air trapped between these stacks of clay. And this chopping process is basically mimicking what our pug mill does. So when we're recycling clay in-house, we use a big machine that's almost like a meat processor, and it turns the clay through a spiral and chops it up, and it comes out in a nice mixed up mush at the end. But we're just mimicking that on a smaller scale here. So this chopping process is quite important. It just gets all those hard bits and soft bits finally mixed through nicely. And then your final step will be wedging. So just a bit of chopping depending on what the consistency of your clay was beforehand. But if you feel it and it feels all pretty good and mushy, we can then start to wedge it up. There we go. Ready to rumble.